You know what? I loved this morning. I sat in the back. I listened to Doug. I've heard Doug speak a few times. And there were two things going on in my head. One was I was absolutely amazed at the incredible amount of content that you received. And the other thing, I was amazed at his ability to communicate and his ability with authenticity and being genuine. And actually, he does this stuff. And I was amazed at his ability to speak with authority, but also realizing that you can do the same thing. And I think sometimes what we do is we hear somebody like Doug speak. It's probably good that I'm up here now. But we can hear somebody like Doug speak and we can go, I could never do that in youth ministry. No, you can't. And you can make great and powerful impact in kids' lives, and you don't have to be as funny as he is or as dynamic as he is. And I think it's really important that we understand that youth ministry is not being a great communicator. Youth ministry literally is not about speaking to thousands. Youth ministry is about hanging out with kids one by one. I saw a movie a long time ago, and it's funny is I never really even saw the entire movie. It was on video, and I came in, and my wife and her friend they were watching this movie, and they're totally into it, so it's like they go, hi. And it was called The Great Santini, I think. And there was a scene in The Great Santini that actually, I think, summarizes where we're going to go. In The Great Santini, again, I don't know much about the movie, but there was this kid, and his dad was an alcoholic, and his dad was kind of a military family, and the dad was very rigid, and the dad really was kind of like pushing on the kid, and the dad was very negative and brought in a lot of negativity to the whole, family and stuff. And there were conversations with the wife and with the son that were kind of saying, we need to leave this guy. I mean, he was a brutal alcoholic at the time. I came from a family where there was lots of alcoholism, actually. Fortunately enough, I didn't have this story. But I do understand that, sometimes there's a big elephant in the room and you sort of don't talk about it. And in this movie, there was this scene where the dad came to the basketball game, the kids' basketball game, absolutely drunk and embarrassed the son. If any of you come from an alcoholic family where a parent has been an embarrassment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And in this particular scene, afterwards, the dad came back to the house and he was he was just totally smashed. And the son was really embarrassed, but the son was really mad. And the dad and the mom got in an argument. It was really abusive, and the dad started to push on the mom. And the son now, he's about 16 years old, so he's about the size of the dad. And he had really never blocked one of their fights, but this time, the son blocked the fight, came in and started to, keep his dad away from his mom and said, bad things to the dad. The dad said bad things to the son, and the son left. And he went upstairs, and all of a sudden the dad takes off too, slams the door, and he's gone. And so the mom is upstairs, and the son is in his other room, and, with the camera, you can kind of, see both of them in terms of the screen. And the mom is crying. And so the son comes in to comfort her, and he said, Mom, let's leave. Let's leave tonight. When Dad comes back, he'll be sober, he'll hardly remember what was going on, and let's just leave. He's a rotten person. He's rotten to you. What he said to you is vile. And Mom says, no. Said, I love him. He said, but look what he has done to this family. Look what he's done to you. He said, no, I love him. And furthermore, I want you to go get him. And this was something that he had to do periodically. And he said, no, Mom, let's leave right now. Let's leave this man. This man is evil almost. She said, no, I love him, and I want to be with him. I can still see this in my mind. The son finally was convinced by his mother to go find his dad, and his dad was not very far away, and he was kind of under this tree, and he was just sort of out of it. And the son, with no emotion whatsoever, comes up to the dad and says, Dad, come on home. I'll get you into bed, because the dad would kind of just fall into bed. And the dad looks up, and he kind of remembered that they'd had this fight, and the dad says a bad word. I don't know what this movie's rated, and he goes, boom, and tries to hit his son. His son backs off. And then his son looks at him as the dad stands up, and he said, Dad, I love you. I didn't expect this because he'd really been mad at him, and I only had seen this part of the movie. He said, Dad, I love you. And at this, the dad goes, and then he stands over on this side, and he says, Dad, I love you. And the guy kind of does this. He's so drunk he can't do it. He keeps going, Dad, I love you. Dad, I love you. And at the very end, he looks at his dad, and he says, Dad, I love you, and you can't stop me from loving you. And then the dad, instead of going to hit him, embraces him. And there's a moment of incredible, really, connection. You know what? That's youth ministry. What we were talking about, you don't have to speak like he does. Your group's not going to be as big as that. The kinds of things we've done, we've given you as Doug said so clearly today, we've given you years of experience. I've been doing youth ministry since 1971. Many of you weren't born in 1971. So the types of material that we're giving, the kinds of things, those are illustrations that have been around for years. My friend Paul Borthwick, who's in Boston, Massachusetts, one time called me up talking about a woman named Marilyn Laszlo, who's, I think, one of the finest Christian communicators in the world. And I'd kind of turned the youth specialties people on to Marilyn, who spent 20 years in Papua New Guinea in the jungle. She translated basically translated their language and put it into the Bible, or made a Bible out of it. And he said, you know what, I just heard Marilyn Laszlo again, and guess what? She has 10 good stories. I said, well, what are you talking about? She has 10. You realize that she spent 20 years in the jungle of Papua New Guinea and all she has is 10 stories? That means there were a lot of days that were pretty boring. That means there were a lot of days that it really didn't have flash. How incredible. Well, if I was going to summarize youth ministry, it's not about all this great foundation stuff. As I was saying, I was sitting back there going, oh my gosh, this stuff is so good. But you know what? Youth ministry is about going to a kid and saying, I love you, and he loves you. And I love you, and he loves you. And it's showing them that. And it's all the stuff that we've talked about this morning. It's all the stuff we talked about yesterday. But in very many ways, it's saying, I love you and he loves you. And if you can really simplify what we're about to talk about, that's it. And if kids know that they are loved and if they know that God loves them, you're going to basically have a healthy ministry and you're going to actually increase attendance. Now remember this, anyone can draw a crowd. Anyone can. You can. But it takes a leader to grow a healthy ministry, and that's very, very different. You can grow a crowd. You know, in recent years, one of the concerns that I've seen in youth ministry, and I happen to think youth ministry is going in great places, but one of the concerns has been that we teach a lot of technique. So if you have this technique, then you can get this many kids coming as if that's going to be the best thing. It's not about technique. But unfortunately, you know, sometimes gimmicks work. I'm aware of a youth ministry that actually offered a car. And they had a drawing and they had a car. And the next week it was the same amount of kids. But it doubled on the day of the car. Doug and I had an experience where I brought in a Christian music group who was actually going on a national tour, but I brought them into the church where we were at to perform before so they could kind of practice this thing. Years and years ago, some of you who are oldies would know this, Steve Taylor. And we filled an auditorium. And we actually had to stop our area Bible study. So that week, Doug would have had an area Bible study, but he didn't do it because what we were trying to do was we were all working on this. I spent probably 100 hours that week, and I mean 100. I mean, I worked overtime, night, whatever, getting this thing together. And we were so excited that there were all these people who came to this event. I mean, literally, you know, a couple thousand people in terms of whatever that seats. Maybe it was, how big is that seat? Maybe it's not a couple thousand. A lot of people. And 2,000. And you know what? That was on a Friday or a Saturday night, and on Sunday morning, we had the same amount of people in Sunday school. And all of a sudden, I had to realize, well, it was great to have Steve, and I'm not saying that's wrong. And our church paid some money, and we put it out. All I'm saying is it may not have been worth it, okay? Because sometimes, you know, gimmicks work. Now, I realize that there is pressure on you to have numbers. One of the questions here that happened yesterday was somebody said, you know, well, what about a pastor who expects us to have our numbers grow? What about the incredible pressure that we feel to be able to say to somebody, last year we had 10 and this year we have 15, or last year we had 50 and this year we have 150, or whatever it may be. And we always play the comparison game, and many times, frankly, we lose. But I'm afraid that we've spent too much time thinking about big. And one of the problems is most of you wouldn't have come to this place, this event. You wouldn't even have come to the Simply Youth Ministry thing if it wouldn't have been somehow connected with the fact that, you know, he's at Saddleback and it's a big church. But the fact is that because he's at Saddleback and it's a big church and there's 900 kids in the high school group and, you know, Kurt Johnson has, you know, 1 million kids and all this kind of stuff. Rick Warren's congregation is 5 million or whatever it is. You know what? That's not your church. And there's certain things that you're not going to be able to do. And sometimes you have to go to other churches that are more proportioned in your way, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Okay? Now, personally, Doug and I are both proponents of numerical growth, spiritual growth and numerical growth. In fact, if you look at the scripture, it says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. And I believe that that is a mark of blessing from God, both numerically and spiritually. And so as we talk about the idea of pursuing health, we probably will increase attendance. But I don't think that the normal goal of a youth group should just be big time numbers. And yet if we're really honest, and I think when we're involved as leaders, We think more about numbers, as we've talked about, than probably we should. So the first point is simply motive. You've got to ask this question: do I care about numbers because of my ego? You know, some of you, including me, have egos that want to impress the pastor, want to impress the other youth ministry network, want to impress families in the church. And I'll find myself doing this. And I talked about this yesterday in terms of the personal side. But I'll find myself thinking about my ego, and I think, well, people wouldn't say that I have an ego. People who hang around with me, they would go, oh, Jim has this big ego. No, Jim does, because, you know, I'll talk with my dad, and I'll say, gosh, we got to speak to 130 youth workers today. And what I want him to go is, wow. Okay. But, so I'll drop that kind of a thing. Well, sometimes I think we're in youth ministry with those same insincere motives. I think we can have some sincere motives as well when it comes to evangelism, when it comes to service and needs. And this is really the kind of thing I want to talk about. So what I want to do is lay a foundation. And the foundation is like when you lay a brick foundation at the beginning, it's not very pretty, but as it builds, it becomes your youth ministry. And the beauty of this material that I'm about to give to you is that we're going to build bricks, and at the end, it's going to look very good. But the beauty of it is don't try to imitate the other people. Make it your group. Just like what you can do so well with a lot of the Simply Youth Ministry material, you can infuse your own stuff. This is not going to be a little, 3 tricks and techniques to having health and attendance. If you get that out of it, then you've got it wrong. What this is going to be is basically you build a healthy foundation and a healthy structure with what I would call basic growth principles. And when you're done, I guarantee you, and I mean I guarantee you, that if you would do it this way, I honestly think that you will have a healthier youth ministry, and because you'll have a healthier youth ministry, the numbers will grow as well. It's like that scripture that we just read. That's a very important scripture when it says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Pretty good. Well, the first one is take care of the students you already have. I would say that one of the biggest mistakes with people who are interested in bigness, if you would, they get so concerned on evangelism. We've just done a great session on evangelism, but we get so concerned on evangelism that we forget about the other people. And so what has happened in America today, especially, and I would imagine it's happening in Puerto Rico and in South America and other places, Puerto Rico's, we want to claim it as part of America, is that we get somebody saved, transformed, redeemed, whatever you want to call it, and then what takes place is that they become spiritually retarded because we don't nurture them. And so some of you might say, well, gosh, I'm a nurturer, so I'm not going to be in a big church. You know what? Because you're a nurturer, you're going to make a better dent in the health of youth ministry because you are a nurturer. I think that the most effective attendance builder is to make sure that you are nurturing the students you already have. If not, they're going to become spiritually retarded. Anybody here been to Poland? Poland's an interesting place, as you probably well know, and I have the privilege to get to Poland every other year pretty much. It's a commitment. I have Poland on my heart. It's a part of my life, and so there's a part of me that has the privilege to speak and train there, and we've got some people who are doing a lot of, actually, this kind of material in Polish. And where we happen to go is right by Auschwitz. So I don't know if you two guys went to Auschwitz, but it's a phenomenal experience. Someday go. And you won't have a great day, and you won't want to eat a wonderful meal afterwards because you'll just be blown away by Auschwitz. Well, my first journey to Auschwitz, it's funny, I was with a guy named Tony Campolo, who many of you would know, who was weeping at some of the things. We happened to be together, and we had a private guy giving us this kind of journey around Auschwitz. And he said, see this place right here? And he kind of shows us this. Now, Lord, I have it in my mind. I can see it. He said, this is where they did the experiments with the babies. And Tony was totally up on it, me being a after World War II guy, totally dumb on this thing. What would happen is the mothers came in pregnant, the Jewish moms, and some of the Poles too. And then what would happen as soon as they delivered their baby, they would have to give up their baby to the nurses, which was one of the most difficult things, that they would have this baby and then they would never be able to see this baby again. And they were doing experiments on the babies. This is not an exaggeration. I was there. I heard it. I have actually now read about it in Reader's Digest. And they would divide the babies from A and B. And so they had their A babies and the B babies. And the A babies, what would happen is the nurses would hold the babies, feed the babies, sing to the babies, change the babies, love on the babies, and do all the things that a mother would do and would in fact nurture the babies. The group B, what they would do is they would feed the babies, and that was it. They wouldn't touch the babies when they would feed them. They'd have the babies laying down. They'd put the bottle in their mouth. When they would change the diaper, but they'd try not to even touch the skin. They would never talk to the babies. They would never sing with the babies. They never nurtured the babies. All of those babies became somehow mentally and even physically retarded in their growth. Well, in reality, you want to do good basic youth ministry, then nurture. Now, some of you are nurturers. And actually, one of the things I'm most excited about with women in ministry is that women tend to be better nurturers than some of us men. And what I love about the fact is with you women who are nurturers, and you men who have that ability that comes naturally, then what you probably have is you probably have more kids who are healthier and more kids who are spiritually connected because they have been nurtured. Some of us who aren't as gifted as nurturers, you know what, we have a harder time. But guess what? We've got to learn nurturing. There's certain gifts that you have, and there's certain gifts that you need, and one is nurturing. And so we'd say it first, we'd say it strong, we'd say it hard, is take care of the students you already have and do it by nurturing them. Secondly is discover needs and meet them. Now, you can write these down if you want and then look at them later, but look at John 2, 3 through 11. It's the story of a wedding that took place, and they needed more wine. So what happened was, the mother of Jesus says to Jesus, they need more wine, and Jesus took care of the need. You see Jesus doing this all the time. This is a great way, it's a principle of growth, but I'm not sure Jesus said, oh, I think these are your basic growth principles. He just found the need and he filled it. I like to say find a need and fill it, and that's what he was doing, okay? If you look at in Mark chapter 2, 3 through 5, by the way, these preach like crazy, all three of these, there was the man who was paralyzed, and so the guys took him up on the roof because he had a need to see, and so they put a hole in the roof and they brought him down. I mean, it's a fun story. It's a cool youth story. But again, find a need and fill it. Discover the needs and meet those needs of the people. People have needs. And when churches are meeting needs, they are going to grow. The next one is in Luke 10, 30 through 34. It's the story of the Good Samaritan. Why does Jesus tell that parable? He tells the parable because there was a man who was in need, and the Samaritan came and took care of the physical needs of this man. He wrapped the bandage around him. He put him on the donkey. He took him to the inn. He paid for it. And so when there are churches that are taking care of the needs of kids, churches that are taking care of the needs of the adults, then basically that's a growth principle. And so what I'm excited about today is that the church is really understanding that. When we talk about evangelism, in 1920 there was a split. This is history. But in 1920 there was a split. And the split happened on the East Coast, where they said evangelism, some people did evangelism and some people did social action. And so you had a group go toward evangelism and you had a group go toward social action. Actually, both were wrong. In fact, I love what Nelson Bell says. He's the father-in-law to Billy Graham. And he said, you can't do evangelism and you can't do social action. You need to, separately, you need to do them both together. I love what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. He said, give a man some bread and then tell him about Jesus. And in many ways, that's the story here. Discover needs, meet those needs. The best way to increase attendance is to meet the needs of the people in your community. Find a need and fill it, like I said. And you know what? When you do this, you got to be genuine. You can't just dangle up something just to do evangelism as if it's some kind of a attendance builder. You can't fake it. They need to know that you're genuine. They need to know that you care. They need to know that you will give them a cup of water in the name of Jesus. And at times, it's the best, as Doug had mentioned, at certain times, it's best to not even bring your Bible along. Give them the cup of water. You think they're going to be thirsty again? Of course they're going to be thirsty again. And what I've seen in youth ministry today in really neat ways is I've seen different programs that are happening. I know of a church that has a tutoring program. And so after school, kids come to the tutoring program and they get around and they do tutoring. But you know what? Conversations about the church takes place as well. They offer it to the community as a free service. And so this doesn't mean that, at the end there's going to be a Bible study, or it just simply means you tutor them. But people in the youth group, both leaders and sometimes students, are tutoring kids. And so it becomes a natural to befriend them as they tutor them. And who can't do that? At least in this area, and I know in many other areas, because of the cost, intramural sports in junior high and high school don't happen anymore. So again, what happens is, Noah Church, they happen to have a gym. It's not the world's greatest gym, but they do basketball teams. They have softball for girls. They do these different kinds of things. They especially emphasize, as Doug had talked about earlier, freshman basketball for girls. And I thought it was a great game. I watched it. It was very exciting. No, actually, and they don't charge $5. But again, they do intramural sports. let's see, other ideas. Some churches, and maybe some of you know this, they do divorce recovery workshops, but not for the parents, but they do it for the kids. More and more, and you're finding this. Doug, give me the name of what the curriculum that is over there that is so good. I hear about this all over the country in terms of kids who are not just struggling with divorce, but are struggling with problems. What? Life Hurts, God Heals. So what happens is you take a Life Hurts, God Heals type of a program, or you do divorce recovery type things, and you do it for kids. And all of a sudden, you're meeting a major need in their life. Well, guess what? If you meet that major need, they're going to come. There's a church not too far from here that does divorce recovery workshops for kids, and they tie it into the adults. So the kids go there, and they're trained by other kids. You know what? The evangelism that takes place is amazing. And the amount of kids who are sitting around a table talking about, the divorce, and then the leader is always trained as a person to say, hey, why don't you come to our youth group sometime? They've been meeting needs. They bring them into the youth group, and they become a part of the youth group. They're integrated into the youth group. So these kinds of programs, overtime, or many people would call it fifth quarter. So there's a need for kids after a football game or after a basketball game to do something. So open up the church and have an event for them, okay? And you can probably get information on Ryan's website on those kinds of things. After prom alternative. Right now, what we're seeing all over the country is that kids go on proms and they stay overnight in these hotel rooms and get drunk and have sex and do all these kind of crazy things. So churches now are doing after-prom programs. Well, you know what? As a parent of 3 teenage daughters, I'm not excited about them going to a hotel. I'm not even excited about them going to somebody else's house where the guys and the girls all sleep together. I am not opposed at all to them going to a program that the church is putting on, if the church puts on some kind of an event. Okay? So again, you can do these kinds of things. You're finding a need that's meeting a need, and you're filling it in many ways. Another idea is undergrad. Okay? The undergrads, what do they do on the last day of school? Seniors have graduation night or grad night, but for the undergrads, there's nothing really for them to do. So sometimes they sort of get in trouble because it's kind of a party time. Why not have the church, at that particular day, do some kind of an event for the undergrad? It's something that... Are they evangelistic tools? Well, yes, but in some ways they're pre-evangelism. It's a fun, high-energy type of an event that you can do. Or, if you're in a much smaller group, it's coming over to somebody's house and watching videos and kind of having a party. The beautiful thing about kids is they don't have to be impressed with fancy stuff. I mean, they have fun hanging out. What are you going to do tonight? I'm going to hang out. So when they hang out, they could hang out at somebody's house in a small way, and you have fun food, and you have some videos, and you do some stuff, and you've created a party. So again, it doesn't have to be big. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 2 or 3 minutes at max, and I want you to come up with days of the year that you could do a special event. Like, so, for example, basic one would be New Year's Eve. So you could do something around that. And I want you to kind of put some events down that would really be finding a need, because this is the time when kids sort of, celebrate anyway, but your church could do something like this in terms of finding a need and filling it. I want you as a group to come up with, see if you can come up with 10 different times. And if you've already done one, great, you can kind of explain it. But I'm only going to give you 3 minutes, so go ahead and do it. Okay, you're not done. I want to interrupt, but I want to make sure we keep moving. But what I'm kind of doing is getting you thinking, and sometimes when it comes to brainstorming, we can do so much better when we're all brainstorming. I want one table to give me, who did come up with about 10? Okay, right back, Kruger, did you? 2. Oh, you guys are, well, you have the Kruger table. That's another story. Okay, right here. If you wouldn't mind, stand up and read some, just read yours so we kind of make sure we're on the same page here. Great. Good. Do something when they have a free day during the school. Good. Fabulous. Okay, and again, so many other people had so many different ideas. Doug and I had a most interesting thing. Doug, I got a call from a family, and I was looking for interns, a place for interns to live. And so this family calls me and says, you know, we've got a little shack overlooking the water, on the water in Newport Beach. And so I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life, and that was I allowed Doug and some of his buddies to live there while I lived in this little tiny shack overlooking nothing. Not by the beach at all. And he spent, a couple years living in this incredible home. And so what we'd do is at homecoming or at proms, we would open up that home, and mothers would come in and they would fix dinners for the kids. So all of a sudden it was cheaper, but the mothers would fix the dinners, but they were in the back, and the kids would be all dressed up. And Doug, I remember, was the server, and we had other interns doing this. And then there would come a time, I remember this so well, Doug would kind of say, and what would you like to drink? And he said, may I get you some wine? At our church, that would not be appropriate. And the kids were like, they're looking at their mothers and stuff. What kind of wine would you like? And so they don't really know, but they, just any kind of wine, you just like some wine. And at that, he'd go like this. And I was dressed, this was on the water in the beach in Newport Beach, and it was his home, believe it or not. And I would have a mask and a snorkel, and I had fins, and I would come out of the water, and I would be walking in fins, and they wouldn't really know. I had a mustache at the time. They could kind of see the mustache. They really might not be sure it was me, because I think for some reason I had something on my head, too. And I would come in with a bottle of Martinelli's. I would hand it to him, and then I would walk back out, and I would go into the water, and I'd swim 3 homes over, and then I'd go up through some lady's house and almost get arrested for walking through her house, and then I would leave. Okay? But you know what? I had the Whartons, who were a part of that. I had lunch with somebody 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about how their kids still talk about that event. Okay? Well, great. The moms did the work. We were there with the kids. It was safer, for one thing, but it was a fun type of an event. That's the kind of things you can do. Thirdly, very important, value a low adult-to-student ratio. Doug has mentioned this, and Doug has talked a lot about this. I will not belabor this, but simply to say, here is the scripture. It's in your notebook and on the PowerPoint, I hope. Is it? Where there is no guidance, a people fall, but in the abundance of counselors there is safety. Another version says, where there is no guidance, a people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Oh, a multitude in counselors instead of abundance. So really what you're trying to do is, people, like he said, they're always asking you, what's the ratio? You know what? The ratio is find adults who love kids and make it where they can have relationships with the Andys of the world and not just with you. And so it's a great illustration. It's, as Doug was talking about, Jesus had 12, 3, and he was God, so, you figure it out. Had an interesting experience when I was in youth ministry, a large high school youth group. There was a guy named Bill Pfeiffer. I'll never forget this. Bill Pfeiffer comes in. He was at a local, actually a Anaheim Vineyard over here, and he has a group of about 10 kids. And Bill was a character, and he came to visit the group. And it was really a bad day. It was very boring. The speaker was very boring. Doug was better other days, but at that time, it just wasn't working. People are kind of throwing airplanes and all this stuff. And my typical experience would be when the visiting youth workers would come, we'd say hi, and then we'd go get something to eat. So Bill is in my face afterwards, and he goes, this really wasn't a very good morning. And I said, well, I've actually seen better mornings, but we just didn't have it together. The guy who was supposed to lead music sort of didn't show, and we did this skit, and it didn't work, and, the teaching, and I don't think it was Doug, I actually think it was me. The teaching was, not good, and, it was just kind of a dud. Kids weren't there. Yeah, it just sort of didn't happen. And he said, I don't understand. He said, you know what, I have 10 kids, and you guys have, there are like 100 kids in here, more. And I said, well, how many leaders do you have? I already knew the answer. He said, well, I don't have another leader. I said, well, then God's probably given you 10. You see? And if you'd get more leaders, then you'd get more kids. Because listen to this principle, and I believe it is a principle. It's not anywhere in the Scripture, but it is a principle, and I think it's a principle that works, and I think it's Scripture related. Well, that Scripture kind of goes with it. In the abundance of counselors, there is safety. God doesn't want his people not safe. And so what's going to happen is when you have counselors around, the more counselors you have who are caring and nurturing and befriending kids, the more he's going to entrust with you with numbers. So if you're a person who must have numbers, then fine, go get some counselors. See? So you want to have a low ratio. Because when it gets too high, then the kids don't feel noticed, they don't feel cared for. Okay? So I think it's a very important, Douglas, I've heard him say, commit to finding shepherds, not just chaperones. I think that's very, very good. The better the student ratio, adult-student ratio, the stronger opportunity for positive numerical growth. That's the principle. 4, maximize the strength of others. You know what? If you're a control freak, and I saw people yesterday because I was talking about control. If you're a control freak, then you're going to have a problem with this. But let's focus on all of you, and you may be head of staff right now, okay? Well, if you are head of staff, you're going to have to be able to release. Now, I mentioned the phrase, but I want to land on it for just a minute. You are either in management or sales. And if you're in management, that means you do have the gift of affirmation. That means or you have the gift of administration, not necessarily affirmation. That means you take care of your staff, you oversee programs well, you supervise well, but it might necessarily mean that you're all that good with kids. Others of you are really good with kids. And what you've got to do is keep working with kids. You've got to figure out to bring somebody else along. The illustration that I would say that works for me is that I had to be with kids. Because as my group started getting bigger and I started doing more administration, I started not liking youth ministry. Because I didn't want to be an administrator. I wanted to be a salesperson. But it meant that I had to bring people around me to be able to do the administration so that we could keep doing sales. Okay? And even in a person, when there's a larger church situation, that's why, and we talked about this, another session, it's so important for you, if you're even in the largest of churches, keep working with your leadership kids. Keep holding a small group Bible study. Still be with kids. Because speaking isn't being with kids. I've spent the last couple of years of my life speaking in some pretty large venues and then walking out. This is why I love this. I mean, I'm just dying with this. I mean, I get to hang out with y'all. And, people are going, hey, I'm sorry, I know you want to have lunch. I'm going, no, please, let's spend time. Because I've been in, Promise Keepers. I'm in a green room, I speak, and I walk back into the green room and I don't talk to anybody. Well, I'm not energized by that, see. But you know what, and not that we're having those experiences in our own youth groups, but what I'm trying to say here is that, maximize the strength of others. Let others win. When they win, you win. It kind of almost goes along with the previous point. But don't always discount the ideas of people who aren't like you. Had an experience once with a guy named Carl who was a nerd. And back in nerd days, I realized, nerd isn't the biggest of words now, but Carl was a nerd. He still is a nerd. And he would wear green pants. Stand up for a second, Peter. He would wear nerds were, during a season, they wore green pants like that. Actually, almost like yours, too. What is it? Shane, stand up. So he wore green pants, okay? Thank you very much. You can sit down. And one day he comes up to me and he says, you know what? The group should go bowling. And I started laughing. I was like the quarterback in high school and whatnot, and I really didn't bowl because I thought it was way too cool. I became a nerd quite quickly. But and I kind of went, you know what? Our kids don't bowl, Todd, or Carl. They just don't bowl. And he said, well, I think they might want to. And I went, Carl, they're not going to bowl. I mean, they're just not going to want to do it. I mean, take a couple of, there's a couple of kids wearing green pants there. I mean, go take them and go bowling. And he said, no, I think, can I make an announcement? Carl, you can make an announcement. So Carl gets up and he kind of tapped on the mic and, he's there in his green pants and he goes, bowling! And everybody just looks at him like, what kind of freak are you? And then he goes, anybody who wants to go bowling, we're going to go bowling tonight. So I'm going, oh, no, you got to give kids more warning than like this. This is ridiculous. And, they're going to go meet in the church parking lot. And, we can use the church van. Jim, can we use the church van? I'm thinking, I don't want to, you don't need a van. He had a Mazda. I mean, three-seater. I mean, that's what you're going to need. And so, anybody meet me in the corner. We'd always do this. We'd always go, if you want to talk about the retreat or whatever, go to the corner afterwards. So it's, meet me over there. And he's all excited. And everybody's just looking at him like, what a freako. So then we go back and do the music and whatnot. I give the talk. And afterwards, I'm kind of looking around going, where is everybody? They're all over in the corner. And we had more kids with green pants than I ever even imagined who were there. We had girls who wore those green pants. I didn't know it. I never paid that much attention to them. So, he comes back and he goes, I think we're going to have to, rent a bus. I'm going, we're not going to rent a bus. And I'm looking, I go, well, how many people? He has them signing up, 40 kids want to go bowling. I'm going, oh, my gosh. Then he calls me at about 2 o'clock and goes, I've been calling bowling places, and, you need to make reservations for this many, and they're all kind of booked because they have, these leagues. I go, Carl, that is your problem, okay? So he finally finds some place. So I end up going, bowling. These kids are in there. They have their bowling balls. They have their bowling bags. They have their bowling shoes. They have their green pants on that match with their, with their shoes. And, they went bowling. We ended up having a bowling league. Well, I would have never done that. What my mistake was, I needed to maximize the strength of Carl, and Carl was a really good youth worker. And interesting enough, over that time, that guy hung out with those kind of kids, which I wasn't as drawn to that kind of a kid. Okay, so the point being that there's some people who have some pretty good ideas, and you may think they're lame ideas, but, let them go. Okay? 5, maybe one of the most important in terms of growth, basic principles for growth and health is think small. You got to think small. Now, I want to do an experience right here. It's going to take us about 3 minutes to do. And what I want you to do is I want you to find a person that is not your spouse. So if you're single, that's actually pretty easy for you. And if you are here with your spouse, which few of you are, but if you are, then you can't be with your spouse on this one because you will win this game, okay? We're going to play a game. It's called Common Bond. So what you've got to do is, why don't we have everybody do this? Everybody stand. Then, now, you may sit down in moments with the person who is sitting right next to you, but just find somebody who is not your spouse and become a twosome, and then I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. Okay, so basically, find a person right next to you and then sit back down, and I know that you're there. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you 1 minute. And in 1 minute, don't start yet, I'm actually going to give prizes, the snapshot and that computer right over there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have you write down as many things that you can find about yourselves that you have in common. Now wait, don't cheat like junior hires do. They would go, we both have noses, we both have ears, we had eye boogers, whatever it is, okay? But the music that you listen to, the things like that, you're going to, whatever you have in common. Maybe you dated the same person in high school and now you're married to that person or something together. I don't know what it is, but I want I'm going to find out who can do the most, and then I'm also going to find out who has just the most bizarre, okay? And in this group, there'll be something that will be bizarre, okay? So ready? You can only have a minute. Ready, go. No more talking, you'll be cheating. Now, how many of you had more than 3? Anybody have less than 3 or 3 or less? Okay, right here. Okay. What were yours?
We know a student at Vanguard.
Okay. Ooh.
We like Pepsi.
And you what? And you like Pepsi. You guys are like really connectors. You're good. What did you not have in common? Like what? But tell me something. I mean, you were talking during this time. So what did you not have in common?
Different things like favorite TV show.
What's his favorite TV?
American Idol.
What's your favorite TV? Oh, okay. So see, what I'm saying is that they learned things about each other. They had major amounts of history giving. It just didn't be that they were together. So in a really good way, they still had a good conversation, even though they only had 2 things in common, and frankly, they're kind of boring. Now, how many had more than 8? Look at that. How many had more than 12? 15. Okay. How many did you have? 20. How many did you have? 23. My goodness. Let's see if they've cheated. Stand up and give us your 23. We're going to vote to see if these guys are the winners. They're both type A personalities, so they get 23. That does make sense. You're not married, though. Okay, good. Just checking. Okay, good. How'd you even get that? I'm going to give you a bonus for that one. Have two snapshots. Could you prove that, please, by letting us see your chest hair? Yeah. That's more information than I would like to see, frankly. Actually, we had a counseling appointment before. He had one hair kind of sticking out right here, and I plucked it today, so I was pretty excited. Oh, go ahead. This is actually really good. Sorry. Okay, wait a minute, stop there. How many of you agree with, if you don't agree with them, just go ahead and put your hand up, that they have taste in clothing? Same taste. Same taste. Okay. I was going to go, wait, nobody else was voting with me, and I was going to say, you guys need help on that. Hey, so basically, you guys could have also said you had something in common with like Jim Baker and some of those kind of people too, because they were Assembly of God and they don't work in Assembly of God anymore either. Okay, go ahead. They were really good. Did anybody else find out something like going, oh my gosh, we have all of us have Pastor Phil's and Pastor whatever. Anybody else find something kind of unique about somebody you were sitting next to? You want to share? Nobody. The rest. So they were the only exciting people in the entire group. Okay, over here. What did you find out? You know what? I didn't hear the. Say it again. Could you? I got the simply, but could you say the rest of it, please? Oh, simplyyouthministry.com. Yeah, if you just type in simplyyouthministry.com, then you'd get to, yeah, simplyyouthministry.com. Good. Think small, simplyyouthministry.com. Think large, simply. No, okay. You know what? What we just did was we played a game called Common Bond. In a minute and a half, because I gave you an extra half a minute. In a minute and a half, and I'll let you come back to your seats in a minute, but in a minute and a half, what you did was you found something in common. You know what, in a large group, if you just have somebody standing up, singing, and speaking, you don't even get that. But you know what, what's amazing is even at the break, there may be times when you're going to continue to talk, and you may talk him into a different type of favorite food, or you guys may find another common bond. What I'm saying is in small groups that happens, because you know what it's called? It's called history giving. And even through the history giving that you had with your, person here, sometimes there's affirmation. Well, guess what history giving and affirmation comes on? Then it comes deeper sharing. And when you share deeper, not that in 1 minute and a half you're going to share deeper, but now you know each other. When you share deeper, then you have a sense of belonging. And when there's a sense of belonging, now you even in a large church, you feel a part of it. And it's really, really important. It's a very important thing to understand. History giving starts in a small setting. You have history giving, you have affirming for who they are, you have a deeper sharing, and then you move to a sense of belonging. And sense of belonging in the Greek is koinonia, which literally means a sense of belonging, a sense of community. And really, thinking small, another word for thinking small is developing community. Now, you can go back to your seats if you want. Some of you. Now, the bottom line, we've been talking about bottom lines. Remember we said the bottom line in youth ministry is not where your kids be not how big your church is, but where will your kids be 5 to 10 years from now. Well, there's another bottom line. And the bottom line is kids will stay in the church and they will love the church when they make friends in the church. If they don't make friends in the church, they're not going to stay. It's all about friendships. Doug was saying that nobody has ever come to him and said, I really appreciated the Bible study that you gave. I just remember it, word for word. But you know what? Think about camp. When kids come and they actually have a check from their parents already, they don't say, and what will you be speaking on? What will be the biblical text? They go, who's going? Because they want relationships. Well, when you think small, you're now thinking community and you're thinking relationships. Now, I want you to do another exercise. It's going to take you 30 seconds. I want you to write down the 5 most influential sermons that you've ever heard in your life and how they've impacted you. Just write the sermons. Okay, you got 30 seconds. Ready? Start writing. Okay, stop. How many of you had 5? No one? It's just like he was when he was in high school. How many had 4? Okay. How many had 3? 2? 1? How many had 0? 0. We're in youth ministry, we have 0. Okay. Now I want you to write down the 5 most influential relationships that you've had. If you have had 5 influential relationships, who they would be, and just write them down. You got 30 seconds. Okay, stop. How many of you had 5? Look at that. How many of you had 4? 3? 2? 1? 0. See, we flipped it, right? Because it doesn't mean that sermons aren't important. It just simply means that relationships are really more impactful, if you would. And you have relationships in a small setting. You don't have it in a large setting, okay? Let's hear who some of them were. Who were some of the people that you wrote down? Mom. Wife. Husband. Sunday school teacher. Mentor. Christ, that's professor. Youth worker. Senior pastor. You know what? These are like normal, regular human beings. These are people. Guess what? If I did this with your kids, many of your kids would say you, and you may not even feel that way. And so again, it's thinking small. Small is good, and it's healthy. And it brings balance to it. Now, you can still have a large group, because a large group, some of the largest groups, they're a mess. Some of the largest groups are great, okay? A large groups, they can be impersonal. So you got to think small. Large groups almost always are program intensified. So you got to think small. Large groups are personality centered. So again, you got to think small if you're going to really influence them. And large groups are spiritually weak. So you got to think small. Because the people that you mentioned were people who probably even spoke spiritually into your life, but it was on a small basis. It wasn't a large basis. Next one, and maybe one of the most important, is attempt creativity. Notice that I said the word attempt. I didn't say be creative. I said attempt creativity. Basically, if you divided yourselves up into different groups, you'd either be a person who would say, I am creative or I am not creative. But you know what? That's not right, because you can all be more creative than you are now. And creativity doesn't mean that you have to be outgoing. Creativity doesn't mean that you have to, you can do some dance. Creativity doesn't mean that you can sing. Creativity is not necessarily about being outgoing or being, actually a loud communicator or whatever it may be. I love what John Updike says. It's in your notebook. Any activity becomes creative when the doer cares about doing it right or better. And creativity means just taking a step back and thinking about it. I mean, which is a better title for a Bible study? If you say to kids, we're going to do a Bible study on the book of Hosea, or if we're going to do a Bible study on, would God want you to marry a prostitute? Okay? it will draw a crowd of parents who will be very concerned about what you're talking about. Creativity impacts your teaching. Creativity impacts things like Doug was talking about, the youth room environment. Creativity, activities, camps, what you're doing with programs, themes, okay? I don't need to convince you that we need creativity. I just need to say you can be more creative than you are now. Be creative, kind of with a purpose in mind. And I guess here's some keys of being creative. Number one, and this is something that has been so important in my life, this is a major phrase that I use all the time. The essence of creativity is the ability to copy. Let me say it again. The essence of creativity is the ability to copy. I didn't say plagiarize, but I said copy. If somebody at your table has had a great youth group experience because they do some game, some Bible study, some event, copy them. The essence of creativity is the ability to copy. Rick Warren has a great comment. He said, I'd rather be effective than original. Let me say it again. I'd rather be effective than original. So the benefit that you have is you have resources galore. And so be a resource junkie. Find resources that work. It's funny, in our youth group, and our whole church, they always thought I was kind of the fun guy who could come up with great games. I just had the ideas books from Youth Specialties, but they didn't know about them. I'd kind of keep them in like brown paper bags, paper bags because people would steal those things. And so I had the ideas books back when there were ideas books. Now you can have them on CD-ROM. But I would have those, and they'd say, hey, we need a game. I'd thumb through it. I'd come up with a great game. Well, it wasn't my game. I wasn't original. I just copied somebody else's idea. Okay? So again, the essence of creativity is the ability to copy. What I want to do is free you up to be more creative by saying, copy it. Don't plagiarize, just copy it. Okay? Secondly, is in terms of creativity, creativity requires exposure. Go to other churches that are doing something good. Go to the websites that Ryan was talking about. Simply Youth Ministry, what is it called, guys back there? SimplyYouthMinistry.com. They've got some very good creative ideas. So go there and again, if you are Assembly of God ordained, but you're now not at Assembly of God church, go to a Presbyterian church. If you're a Baptist, go to another type of church and see what they're doing in youth ministry. I don't need to spend much time here because you're at this event right now and you're being exposed to it. Everybody look at the 10, the new 10. This is for Doug, not for me. He's getting better. So again, creativity requires exposure. Creativity requires time. At least in my own life, few times do I get creative when I'm so busy. I find that my best creative times are when I'm away, when I'm taking a walk, when I'm rested. And so again, you're going to need some time. Creativity requires brainstorming. I am always amazed at how much better we can get when it comes up with a program when we brainstorm it instead of me just trying to come up with one. I'm missing a meeting. Actually, the meeting starts at 3 o'clock. But I'm missing a meeting today where our team comes together and we brainstorm radio ideas. And I'm always amazed at when we're talking about topics, people, whatnot, because I'll come up and I'll be all proud, like I'll have 3 ideas. And then we've got like 5 or 6 people in the room and the energy's flowing and they're going, what about this, what about that, what about that? And all of a sudden, we have phenomenal ideas, but it's because we were brainstorming. And no bad ideas in brainstorming. You don't use them all. But you don't want to say, well, that was a dumb idea, because then they won't throw it out. So, brainstorm. When you're looking for events to do in the church, when you're thinking about Bible studies and whatnot, brainstorm with students, brainstorm with leaders. And also, creativity requires risk. Let me just put it out. You got to risk. Some of us get so comfortable that we do the same Bible study, we do the same events. Sometimes we have to risk, and sometimes we will fail. I have a friend named E.G. von Trexler, who's actually even older than me in youth ministry, if that's possible. And I was with him once in Mexico with a bunch of youth workers, and he had like a gift. I said, what's this? He goes, oh, it's for my Bible study tonight. He was going to teach in Mexico at the juvenile hall where he's done for years. And I said, well, what are you going to teach on? He said, I'm going to talk about the fact that God looks at the inside and not on the outside. It's in 1 Samuel 4:17 or something like that. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, it's an object lesson. He said, I've put garbage in this bag. I just emptied out, my trash bag from home, and I've wrapped it really nice, and then I'm going to put a bag, and he had a paper bag, and he said, I'm going to put a $10 bill in here, and I'm going to put it out in front of the students, and I'm going to say to them, and these are, kids who are in juvenile hall. He said, then which one do you want? Do you want the present, or do you want this paper bag? And he said, they're going to go for the present. I've done this before. So they're going to go for the present, and then they're going to open it, and it's trash, but it looks good on the outside, but on this one, I'm going to have a $10 bill, and, I'll show them that, the bag doesn't look all that hot. I went, oh, that's phenomenal. Now, what did I say? The essence of creativity is the ability to copy. I had a Bible study Wednesday night. They were in my home, 12 people around here. And so I decided to do the same thing. I was so proud of myself because I get the bag, there's coffee grounds, banana peels, all this kind of junk, throw it in there. Some of the cigarette butts from Doug because I think he'd been over. And I wrap it all up. And then this is, Dana Point, California, so I put a $20 bill in because of the inflation, of course. And 12 kids come in. All of them shake the thing. Doug Webster was at this. Doug Webster comes in and shakes it. He's going, hey, what's the gift? I said, oh, you'll see. Now, I didn't prep much for my Bible study because I have the illustration of the life. This is going to be so great. Had my scripture. I had, this illustration. Had the bag. It was there. Almost everybody picked this thing up, kind of went like this. So I went, cool. So it's time for the Bible study. Forget any kind of game, forget any kind of singing. I'm ready for the Bible study. So I just put the deal out in the middle with the bag, and I looked at this girl named Dana. I said, Dana, which do you want? Most materialistic kid I've ever seen in my life. I know she's going to help me. And she goes, can I touch the present? Sure. She shakes it. She goes, I think it's a trick. She said, I think you have garbage in here, and you probably have money or something in this bag. I said, okay, that's one opinion. Thank you very much, Dana. I said, Josh, how about you? So Josh, I think Dana's right. I think it's a trick. Okay, I look at Doug Webster, who's our mutual friend. I said, Doug, help me out here. I couldn't say, Doug, help me out. What do you think about this really good-looking present in this kind of ugly bag? And I'm trying to have him say, yeah, I'd take the bag because it was ugly. He said, oh, it's a trick. I mean, I don't know if it's garbage, but you got something really, stupid in there, and you got something like maybe even money in the bag. And I'm like, all the kids are like looking at the bag. And I said, okay, great. I said, Tom, why don't you just open this present here? And so he opens it. When he opens it, trash and garbage and some coffee grounds go on our carpet. So now Kathy, it's ruined the deal because my Kathy, not his Kathy, she wasn't at that Bible study. My Kathy comes over, and now she's cleaning the coffee grounds. So, we've had to interrupt the thing, but everybody's going, yeah, it's garbage. And then this point, they all go, there probably is money in that bag. And 12 bodies all go for the bag. I take it. And I open it, and I go, okay, there is a $20 bill in here. I said, what was supposed to happen? I said, and the scripture says, and pretty much I just needed to fade it. Now he's had you think his deals always work too. His problem is with fish. He was going to do this kind of object lesson with fish one day, and there's all these students there, and so he's playing around with this fish tank that he brings in, and all of a sudden the hose breaks, and the fish tank hose water is spraying all of the kids, and they never even made it to the Bible study because they had fish water. Of course, another time in his life, on his 5th anniversary, I'm not exaggerating this. I can talk about Doug since he's talked about, it's even talked about his father-in-law. He rips on Andy. So what happened is he had this romantic idea that, and I don't know why fish are romantic, but he thinks fish are romantic. So he buys, some people would buy flowers and chocolate. He buys Kathy an aquarium for her 5th wedding anniversary. Okay. And so he has it all set up, but then he gets her out where she doesn't see it. They go out to a really fancy dinner at Del Taco. And then he comes back to show her all this beautiful tropical fish, which, by the way, is pretty expensive. So he bought all this expensive tropical fish. When he comes back, there are no fish in the tank because what had happened was he had got the filter put in wrong, and the filter had sucked the fish in and chewed them up. So when Kathy came back, there was like chewed up fish in there. Now, I don't know what that has to do with creativity, but the moral of the story is never let Doug near a fish. But creativity requires risk. And so, even his, that was risk. It didn't necessarily work. But think about it in your own life. A lot of times when you've risked, it's been the best Bible study. It's been the best youth group meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And when we think about the whole idea of creativity, we just, you can be more creative than you are now. Also, learn about growing from growing examples. And what I mean by that, look at churches that are growing numerically and spiritually. Now, I mentioned this in passing, but this is worth writing down. Be a student of proportioned churches, not just the large ones. Some of you who are in smaller churches, or what I would say average churches, and some of you are in churches that are larger than average, but you think they're small because you're playing the comparison game. Be a student of proportioned church. There's some great things happening in some churches that are a lot smaller than Saddleback. Okay? And so learn from them as well. And then also be aware of the fact that there are churches, for example, there's a church in our area that has 400 people coming to the church. They have 200 students. That's 50%. That's incredible. I would doubt that he doesn't have 50% at Saddleback. Now, that doesn't put him down. we all agree, incredible job. But again, there's some churches that you can learn from that might be in the same level as you, that actually have more kids coming, more kids going into ministry, more kids doing mission, more kids sharing their faith, whatever it may be. So learn from them. Okay, so look at growing churches and growing examples and churches that are growing numerically and spiritually, not just numbers, because then you're going to get into technique. For example, things that I look at is I look at churches, we'll just take this area. Saddleback, they do area Bible studies. It's brilliant. Instead of having kids from Mission Viejo go all the way to Orange to be in a Bible study or even go to the church, what they do is they have a local area Bible study. Okay, it's a great idea. They've put it together in local Bible studies. They have their temple courts thing, but then they're in the homes, and they do them in areas. Brilliant idea. However, at Evangelical Church, Free Church Fullerton, which again is a great church down the road, they do it by grades, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And in fact, they have leaders who start with them in junior high, and each year they just move up to the grade level, so they've been with those people for 6 years. See? And so when you have a talk on sex, or when you have a talk on certain things, you can do it age appropriate because it's all 9th grade, or it's all 10th grade, 12th grade, and a 9th grader. Those are two very different levels. Great idea. So you learn by going to that church and saying, gosh, that may work better in our place. Years ago, Willow Creek Church, or the Willow Creek Association, what they did more back a few years ago is they did it by competition. I can remember going to my first Willow Creek type experience, and I went, whoa, this is brilliant, because they had the orange team and the red team, and they actually got points for bringing kids and all this kind of stuff, and there was lots of fun and energy. I went, God, this is a great idea. Okay? They're not going that way as much now, but they had teams, and so they worked around teams. So 3 of the exact same ways of looking at something, but they did it a little bit differently. You can learn from them. And again, like I said, maybe not just with the big churches either. Leadership principle, you can learn something from anybody, and so I think that's what you do. Pursue evangelistic environments. We put it in here. Doug has already talked about it. I would just simply say that for those of you in smaller churches, piggyback on what larger churches are doing. They've got the money, they've got the budget, fine, bring your kids there. You know what? You sometimes won't go there because you say, well, that church is so big, the kids will want to start going. No, they go to where there are relationships. So it's actually more effective for you to put them in the van, drive them to the big church, experience the blessing of the big church evangelistic thing, then get back in the van, go get something to eat, hang out, and you know what? You're not going to lose them. But you can, again, take the time and the energy to build relationships with them. So, it's kind of an entry-level event. Find entry-level events. Sometimes somebody else will put on that entry-level event. Very quickly, let me just say, here's some questions for big events with evangelism. Doug has covered this so well. How much time will it take? What is the purpose? Is it worth the effort? And will it glorify God? Those are really great questions to think about when you're going to do an evangelistic event and kind of create an environment around there, okay? Well, and point 9 is fail occasionally. I don't think you're doing good youth ministry if you don't fail at times. It's okay to fail. We learn from our failures, as Doug has said. I love what's, it's on the PowerPoint here. I love this by Winston Churchill. I just read a speech book by Winston Churchill, and I love this quote. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I love Michael Jordan's quote. I can accept failure, but I can't accept not trying. And then probably for the first time in a Simply Youth Ministry event, I'm going to quote Robert Schuller from down the street. He said, this has been very important in my life in the last year, I would rather attempt something great and fail than attempt nothing and succeed. So fail. Go for it. You have a dream. I've talked to some of you. Your dreams are amazing. Funny, right at this table, right here, an amazing amount of dreams. Go for those dreams. I have incredible dreams. My dreams have failed. There have been things that haven't worked at all with me. And I know the same with him. Ask him about some of his failures. Ask him about a time between one church to another. Was it a failure? You wouldn't look at it as a failure. It was what built him to be who he is today in some ways. So we learn from our failures. And then lastly, and don't miss this just because it's the last point, is go positive. Remember, what we're talking about here is building growth, and both numerical growth and spiritual growth. But in basic growth principles, one of the major ones is go positive. You know what? People are drawn to positive. Now, I'm not talking about don't be a realist, don't have friends who you can complain to. But you know what? If you want kids to grow and you want to build an environment, it's about environment and it's about attitude here. So go positive. Now, you need to find somebody that you can whine to. So Doug can come to me and say, you know, Rick Warren is a punk and I'm a lot better than he is, and I really wrote Purpose-Driven Life. And I can just go, you're right, he's a punk. Okay? But you know what? He can't go say that to somebody on his church staff. Okay? So find places where you can whine, but make it outside of the church. So you can be positive. If you are the head of staff, it is your job to create a positive environment. And this is not an over-exaggeration. If you have a positive environment, kids will rush in to come and hang out with you. And they will rush in to be there, but you take the lead. And if you're negative and critical, or if you've always got, you know, some hair, not that I have a whole lot of hair, or they don't either, except on the top of their head. But if you've got, you know, some hair up your rear or whatever, I got news for you. You know what? They are not going to come. So be positive. Being positive is very, very critical. So I must quote Norman Vincent Peale. He says, getting people to like you is merely the other side of liking them. Great quote. Getting people to like you is the other side of liking them. Like them. Care for them. Bigger isn't better. Healthier is better. And health will lead to growth, so start with health.